Hello and welcome back to another Friday night. I am Rafael di Furia, back at it again to talk a bit more about expat life and living here in Italy as a dual citizen and what things are like actually here on the ground. In this video this week, I'm going to answer some more questions that have been sent by you guys. It's a combination kind of a Q&A as well as an FAQ because some of these questions do come up quite often. But before we get too much deeper, if you would like to see more content like this about moving to Italy, living in Italy, and life in Italy, be sure to subscribe with that notification bell turned on, and if you could also give this video a like and share it with your friends, that would be greatly appreciated. And of course, a huge thank you to the patrons who help to make these videos possible. Your assistance to make these videos possible, to help keep this project going, is truly appreciated, so thank you very much. Let's get into the video. And because I need to start looking at my phone again, it is time to bust out the glasses yet again. Actually, this first question that comes this week is from Patreon, from patron Ed S. The message is, "Hi Rafael, I have a Permesso di soggiorno question for you. I'm an Italian citizen and my wife is a US citizen. When we move to Italy, I know that she will need to go to the local questura to start the PDS process. How does it work?" And to preface my response, I am not a lawyer, legal advisor, or legal specialist, so of course I have to recommend that you would speak to somebody who is, but even though I'm not an expert on the subject, that doesn't mean I don't know anything about it. But what I can say is that on the podcast that I'm a part of, that's from Marco Permunian, an Italian citizenship assistant who I mentioned, I think a week ago or so, maybe 2 weeks, we do a podcast on their YouTube channel about Italian citizenship and so on. And actually, I know there is going to be a podcast episode in the next, hopefully, few weeks or so that will go more into depth onto this process and this subject. But what I would say, just as like a quick little tidbit, from what I understand, it's pretty straightforward, and my understanding is that once the Italian spouse is registered here in Italy, then that makes it so that their non-Italian spouse can start going through their process. For the Italian spouse, it's necessary to deal with the comune. Once that's dealt with, then you can go to the questura. But again, for more on that subject, if you wait to watch the episode that will be coming out, there's going to be a lot more details in there. But moving on to the next question that is on Instagram from Josh. "Hey, I've been watching your videos on YouTube for a good few months now. In one of them, you mentioned how hot Rovigo was at the time." And then basically what the rest of the message kind of boils down to from there is that he saw that the weather happened to be pretty warm here right now and asked how I was dealing with it. And I would say I just got out of the shower a few minutes ago, completely dried off, and I already feel like I've taken a shower again, and that is even after turning on my air conditioner. It's really hot here. I don't think I've ever sweat this much in my life. This is one of the things that specifically about Rovigo that I'm really not crazy about, how humid it is here. Because when I lived in Alto Adige before, while it did actually get hotter there, the humidity here is just way more intense. The macro region, whatever you're going to call it, the Polesine, it's this area that I live in. I forget the term in English, but it's an area of land that's between two rivers. One to the north, one to the south, and then there's other little mini rivers around. But because of that, that means that there is a huge amount of humidity here. And kind of attached to all of this, one of the things that Rovigo unfortunately seems to be known for is the mosquitoes here. There are tons and tons and tons of mosquitoes. And actually at the beginning of the whole situation before lockdown here, or actually, sorry, during lockdown, the discussion came up in the local newspaper about if the current, if you've been watching my videos, if you say it actually out, then it's a whole problem. Your video gets flagged. So the way I'll say it is this bug that people are dealing with. One thing that they were concerned about here, as well as other places around the world, was if the buggeroo could actually get passed by the mosquitoes. But anyway, to answer the question about if it's hot here, it is. It is hot as hell. And then some. It's one of the few things in Italy that I'm just not a fan of, that it can get very hot in the country. But anyway, going on to some videos of mine that have received some questions. One in particular, finding work in Italy, do I need to know Italian? Life in Italy, Q&A number 2. From Milka J. Great video. Well, thank you. May I ask what the teaching situation is? Can one live on a teacher's salary? I know people who do, but I would say I do not know one English teacher who is living in a way that I would say would be very comfortably. They're doing okay, especially the English teachers who I know who are part of a couple and are living together, married or unmarried, and they have the shared living expenses that they don't have to worry about as much, or someone who has roommates. Then I would say I have seen people getting by a lot better, but it really just depends on the types of schools that you find, because at some schools it would be an hourly rate that is not guaranteed how much work you will or won't have. But then if you go and teach at an actual like public school or a private school, then you will have a certain amount of hours that would be guaranteed, which would be a monthly salaried job. So it really depends. It's difficult to say that yes, of course, or no, absolutely not, because you have every kind of situation. I do know English teachers here that can't get by with their English teaching alone. But then I do know those other teachers who actually do pretty okay. It all depends on what you're able to find. But moving on to the next question. From Bob S. How is the internet access in Rovigo? This is on my Rovigo, Italy video, that the one where I moved here, where I first spoke about actually coming here, being here. Basically what Bob said was that he has a tech business, and as long as there's a good internet connection, that he can get by. And I would say actually the internet here in Rovigo has been really great. I've really had almost no issues. Maybe I've had 1 or 2 outages the whole time that I've lived here. And I would say even when I lived in Alto Adige, where the internet was also pretty good, where I happened to live and the access that I had to it, I experienced many more outages there than I have here. I'm assuming that the internet line that runs through here is pretty important and connects some major parts of the country. So I think in this area they take care of it a little bit better. But I know if you're going to Alto Adige, it's kind of like the end of the train line. And so if one thing happens kind of on anywhere in the line up to it, then everybody loses internet, which is something that did happen a couple of times when I lived there. But it was never really for more than, say, 12 hours, maybe 15 hours. Currently at this point in time, I have fiber to the cabinet, but I've heard that, I don't know if it's going to be this year or sometime next year, or maybe the plan has changed, which could be very likely. But I think in the next year or so, there's a plan to have, at least on the main street in the city, fiber to the house, not fiber to the cabinet. So that's something that's going to be a huge benefit to people who do live on the more central areas. But if you live in some of the more kind of main areas of the town, it seems like everybody has fiber. But of course, if you go out a little bit, then the situation could be very different. I have to admit, this next question kind of caught me a little off guard. It was on my video, falling in love with someone from another country, from Nicole S. Does it have to strictly be in Italian, or can it be a girl learning Italian? Hint, hint. Like I was saying in the video, for me, the most important thing is that I can communicate with the person in English. That's kind of joking aside, really the most important thing to me in any relationship, even friendship, something that is very important, is to be able to have open communication. So for me, with an Italian who doesn't speak English, it would actually be a lot more difficult potentially. But at this point, I'm just kind of like, whatever happens, happens. But actually, another comment from that video from La Voce Giusta, I'm guessing the woman was Eastern European. If I'm assuming correctly, this would be in reference to what I said about when dating or when meeting women, that the whole my being American seemed to be more of interest than me being me. Green card and all that kind of stuff. And so actually in this situation, no, I've really not dated Eastern Europeans. I've not dated any Italians, but it hasn't even gotten to that point, because most of the time with a good portion of the Italian girls who I've been in contact with, I'm not saying that this is all Italian girls, just the ones that I've happened to come across, is that unfortunately they seem to be more interested in my passport than me. And for me, like, it's okay. I actually don't really have a problem with it, because if I see those signs very early on, I just know not to get involved. It's as simple as that. Much easier to be single in some ways anyway. But if the right situation were to come into place, then hey, I am open to these things. But anyway, moving back to more about living in Italy and working in Italy. On my video, how to move to Italy with or without Italian ancestry, if I'm not mistaken, it is video number 61. From user CP is just the way I'll put it. I'm not sure if there's a particular meaning behind this username that I would rather not say on camera, so I will just go straight to the question. Is there a way to just apply for a green card like in the US? Like if you go to Italy as a sponsored employee, do you get some sort of ability to stay in the country for a certain amount of time? Yes, there is something called a Permesso di soggiorno that does exist for people who are getting work, but you will find that it is very often the case that companies don't want to sponsor a visa unless you are in a very specialized field and you have a very specialized set of skills. But what I have seen happen is that people who say work at a company in the United States that's a multinational company, is that they have been able to get transfers to Italy or to other places in Europe, basically keeping their same job or a similar job within the organization. Because depending on your situation, if you're a dual citizen, for a company, they will much prefer to go with a dual citizen rather than somebody who, if you're from the US, for example, if you only have an American passport, they might not want to deal with you because you'll have to deal with lawyers and visa fees and applications and this and that, and it's not a guarantee. Whereas if somebody holds an American passport and a European passport, an EU passport, then that person would be more likely to be at the front of the line. That's just something that makes it easier for the company to deal with in the long term, and even especially in the short term. But moving on to the next question on the video, why I left America more than 10 years ago, which is actually more than 11 years ago now, on video number 114 from Adrian D. Basically skipping ahead to the question, she's someone who's of Italian descent who's thinking about applying for Iure Sanguinis, and she asked if having Brazilian citizenship actually posed a problem for me personally when I petitioned for my Italian citizenship. And for me personally, no, it didn't, because all of the documents that I needed were from the United States. United States plus Italy. I didn't need any Brazilian documents in this case. So for me personally, no, but for the Brazilians that I know who have been going through the process and have dealt with the process, it seems to be pretty normal. It seems to be that the non-renunciation check, the non-rinuncia, that seems to be a headache kind of no matter where you are on earth. And I've actually heard of some Brazilian consulates dealing with this much faster than even some American consulates, like the New York consulate, for example. But it, of course, also depends on where in Brazil your family was and where those documents would come from, and to make sure that in the consulate that has jurisdiction over that area, because that it could add to the time or could make the process go even more smoothly, because there are some parts of Brazil where you have a lot more people of Italian descent and you have other parts of Brazil where there are a lot fewer. But moving on to the next question on my video, Iure Sanguinis Italian citizenship, apply in Italy versus applying in the US, video number 39 from Karelis R. And this actually kind of is similar to what I was talking about before. This question has some overlap about getting a sponsored visa to come work here in Italy. But the question here specifically is, what if the person is not of Italian descent and wants to live in Italy and get Italian citizenship? So a person who is not of Italian descent, or a person who cannot document their lineage, have no right to citizenship right off of the bat in Italy. The way that it would work is that if a person wants to get Italian citizenship for non-EU residents, if I remember correctly, again, if you watch the Italian citizenship podcast that I'm a part of, you'll be able to find out this information in more detail there. But the way that it runs down, if I remember correctly, I think we actually uploaded this a week ago, or it's going to come out soon. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head. Sometimes it's difficult to remember which video comes out at which point, because it's a lot of content that comes out and it's a lot of complicated subjects. But anyway, not important. Anyway, if I'm not mistaken, the breakdown that kind of comes into place is that for a person not of Italian descent to be able to become eligible for Italian citizenship, you have to legally reside in Italy for 10 years and have a language certificate if you're not from the European Union. But if you are from the European Union, that gets put down to 4 years, and if you are of Italian descent, but your grandparents or parents renounce their citizenship before the birth of the next generation. So if your grandparents renounce their citizenship before your parents were born, or if your parents renounce citizenship before you were born, either automatically or by choice, then I believe it goes down to 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. For this, you have to be a legal resident of Italy and meet all of the requirements to be able to get a permesso di soggiorno and not have an interrupted actual residence here in Italy. Because even if you move from place to place, if you don't register your domicile, if I remember correctly, that can actually even make you have to restart the count from the beginning in some cases. And for the last question for this week, from GGS on my video Moving Abroad, looking back on 11 years of being an expat, part 1, video number 143. The question was, as you've changed your comune of residence at least twice in Italy, would you say it is a long and complicated process to do this as a non-native speaker? So I wouldn't say I've technically changed my comune twice, even though, yes, if my personal comune of residence has been changed only once, but my registration with a comune has changed twice. The first time it was my ancestral comune where my family originally came from, then moving, because I was registered in their aire, then that changed over to Merano where I lived before, and then from Merano I had to get it switched over to here in Rovigo. As a non-native speaker, I didn't find it daunting. I didn't find it to be a difficult process, but you need Italian, or you need someone who speaks Italian to come and help you with at least the paperwork. Sometimes they'll ask you questions verbally. Sometimes the questions will just be on a piece of paper that you have to fill out. I've seen it happen a couple different ways because I've also seen people going through this, and each time it seems to be a little bit different. Of course, it's always the same process. It's just the way that it seems to be handled each time depending on the clerk behind the counter. Pretty much like with every other situation in Italy, it comes down to the discretion of the clerk how they kind of handle things in some aspects. So could you handle it as an English speaker only? No. Do you need some Italian? Definitely. When I was in Merano, I happened to actually kind of get a little bit lucky because at that time my Italian was really bad, and it's still, I would say, pretty bad, but you can be the judge of that yourself if you watch my last video. And also had a little bit of German under my belt. And at the comune there, they're actually required to know German and Italian. So between mixing the two languages together and the woman behind the counter happened to have a little bit of English, we were able to mix things and mash things up together in just the way that we could make it work in the end. So again, depending on your level of Italian, I wouldn't say it's necessarily something that's so complex. But anyway, thank you all so much for joining me on another Friday night. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing. And of course, especially thank you to the patrons who help to make these videos possible and to help the project to be able to continue. And of course, if you'd like to see more content about moving to Italy, living in Italy, and life in Italy, be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel and give this video a like and share the video with your friends, as it greatly does help out the channel. And you can also find posts of mine on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, some of the major social media platforms. I'm not so active on Twitter, but if you type in @Rafael di Furia, you can probably find me. Thank you again so much for joining me on another Friday night. I look forward to seeing you all next Friday, and I hope you all have a great weekend. See you all next time. Later.